The types of econometrics, mathematical concepts, example and application. Whenever we are introducing to the discipline of econometrics, we refer to the definition of econometrics as pointed out by the earlier econometricians, statisticians and the economists. Econometrics is a quantitative application of statistical inferences. So by statistical inferences, we mean by the hypothesis testing, the theory that is being validated on the basis of data, and also it is basically presenting the economic theory which needs to be examined or empirically treated. Mathematical models are taken up. On the basis of that, theories are to be developed or existing hypotheses are to be done. This also looks into the future trends because forecasting issues also play an important role. Based on that, we can get an acquaintance of the data over a period of time. So when we go for the econometrics, it is basically a quantitative examination of the data. So the function of the econometrics is to convert the real world data to statistical trials. For example, whenever any data is collected on any particular phenomena, the data actually has lots of information in it. Those information are taken up into the forefront and thereby the statistical trialing is being done. This also takes care of the theories that are being to be validated. Moreover, econometrics basically converts qualitative into quantitative statements. So by qualitative, we mean the responses which are in characters, and by quantitative, we actually means the numbers, or that is how it can be expressed. So econometrics basically makes the real world or the applications where we can apply to the data which is available from the database or can be collected from the primary survey, but the validation is being done, and based on the validation we can get in for some kind of analysis and inferences can be drawn. Based on the concept of econometrics as an overall or a separate discipline in the study, we can identify what can be the types of econometrics. Like it can be theoretical or it can be applied. So when we refer to a theoretical econometrics or an applied econometrics, we basically want to give a proper definition to it. So in each category, we have the word of classical or the Bayesian tradition, and econometrics also relies on the mathematical statistics. So basically, it is an amalgamation of all the things taken together. When we refer to the types of econometrics, first we refer to the theoretical type, then we refer to the applied type. Other types also refers as classical, Bayesian, and thereby the econometrics is basically an application of the theory in practice. That is what the applied comes in. Whenever we refer to the theoretical econometrics, it is basically on the classical definition of the concept, and so it is fundamental in nature. And thereby, theoretical or classical types fall under the branch of econometrics. When we refer to the classical type again, then it is the Bayesian, and Bayesian is an application of the theory, and that is taken care of. So based on that, we can explain that the Bayesian, which can be both theoretical, classical, which can be both applied, and thereby the econometrics takes a very new shape. So on the basis of this, we can define the concepts one by one. First of all, theoretical econometrics is about analyzing the existing statistical procedures. So whatever statistical procedures we have, we want to analyze them, and we have to predict some unknown parameters in the economic data. So that is how the econometrics comes up. Beside analyzing the current statistical procedures, because apart from the current procedures, we also look after the theoretical econometricians, because they actually follow or they actually devise some statistical procedures. For example, whenever we want to test any kind of regression, or after the regression output is being made, we want to test the diagnostics. For example, whether the result follows all the OLS assumptions or not. So when we are looking into the diagnostics, it is basically referring to the testing which are devised by the theoretical econometricians. Whether it is an augmented Dickey-Fuller test, or it's a test for autocorrelation, or a test for heteroscedasticity, everywhere the theoretical foundations are being done, and thereby it is the role of an econometrician to do that. But that will be done in a theoretical framework, that is in the fundamental part or the classical part. Moreover, theoretical econometricians also depend on the mathematical techniques, because with the help of the theory that they are devising, They want to treat in the data whether the theory stands or not, or how the theory is being validated. So this is generally being done to generate some correct conclusions. So based on that, the theoretical economics looks into. Theoretical econometricians also go for a general linear model, that is a model where the slope and the intercept comes together. It also looks into the simultaneous equation models because the models where both equations are interchanged with each other. It also takes care of the distributive lag models because we see sometimes a variable can be dependent on its own past observations. So that is how a distributive lag model comes up. So overall, theoretical economics looks into fundamentals, distributions, and also the statistical procedures can be applied. Next, we get into the concept of applied econometrics. So in applied econometrics, we see that how the theory and the practice, they can be amalgamated together to draw the necessary conclusions. And this can be used for the decision making. So whenever any kind of decision making is being done, whenever any kind of economic issues are being done, then how the data and theory can be mixed up with each other. It is also an econometric technique that converts the quantitative into qualitative, or sometimes we get the data in qualitative terms and we want to quantify them. For example, in any questionnaire, we take the responses in binary form like yes or no. So that can be coded. So any kind of responses which is in character can be converted to a categorical variable, and based on that we can go for applied econometrics, which is an application unlike the theoretical approach. In the similar manner, we can also explain how these applied econometrics can be helpful for government, for policy making, obviously for the policy makers, for the businesses, for the financial institutions, and for every one of them, how we can solve the economic problems. So basically the trend analysis, the prediction of the model, all of them comes under the dynamics of econometric modeling. So when we are referring to any applied econometrician, and when we are comparing the household income with the inflation or any such kind of relationship we want to bring about, always we keep in mind the application part because we want to test it with the real life data. So applied econometrics is basically the application of the fundamental theories or the concepts that are being built up and how they can be applied for getting any general modeling or the results. So this gives us to the very first question, which refers to what are the different types of econometrics. So econometrics can be divided into two broad categories, theoretical econometrics and applied econometrics. So when we refer to theoretical econometrics, it's concerned with the development of appropriate methods for measuring the economic relationships specified by the econometric models. So whenever we refer to any kind of econometric model, whenever we refer to any kind of economic relationships, that is what theoretical econometrics looks into. So in applied econometrics, we are using the tools. That means we can use in the field of economics and business. We can use in the field of production function, investment function, demand supply. So everywhere we can take care of the different types of econometrics in this regard. Now, we get into the mathematical methodology of econometrics. That is, what are the steps involved when we are carrying out any kind of research problem in this particular discipline of econometrics. First, we go by the suggestion of the theory. Because first aim is to frame a theory or a hypothesis, and that can be deep-rooted in the underlying assumption of any economic logic. Like I want to examine any particular piece of data. So applied econometrics heavily rests on economic theory. For example, we go for an international economics, where we find out how the domestic prices and the foreign prices behave with each other. What is the dynamics between the domestic price and the foreign price? So this dynamics can be explained in the nature of econometric modeling or in the nature of theory. So that is where the theoretical part comes in. Secondly, in the methodological aspect, we can specify a statistical model. So when we are specifying a statistical model, then it gives us a relationship between dependent and explanatory variables of the model. For example, we want to do a study on determinants of stock prices. So apart from the price of the stock, we have to take many economic variables. many institutional variables, many political variables, all of them will be affecting the statistical model, and thereby we can go for any kind of economic relationships. So a dependent variable will be influenced by a lot of independent variables, and that is what we mean by a statistical model. So by the statistical model, we can also ensure the linearity. Linearity means we are considering any kind of change in the explanatory variable. That means if the independent variable changes, then how can the dependent variable will go for a change. So this is how we can insert new variables, or we can delete some variables and capture its effects. So that is how a statistical modeling can be done, and which can be explained by the complexity of the data. So statistical modeling is very basically specified in this manner. The third one, after the empirical specification is being done, we go for the estimation. So whenever any kind of specification is being devised between the dependent and the independent relationship, we go for the estimation. So how it is being done? Because the data is collected from the population, and that data we call as a sample. So we want to test whether the features of the sample are the true reflections of the population or not. And in order to do this, we go for the estimation process. So this estimation process usually involves a statistical procedure which can be applied by any kind of econometric software. So it is very important that when we are estimating any model, we want to deal with a data. And this is what is important in the easiest part of the analysis, is that availability of economic data. So today it is very much available over different database, and thereby econometrics can take care of that. But actually we are going to go for a GIGO method. That means garbage in and garbage out. So we can get ample data, and from that data we can extract the data which is necessary to carry on the analysis, and thereby the estimation can be done. Now on the basis of all these factors, we need to find out the term of proofreading, which may be dealing with any kind of research manuscript, but in this econometric modeling also there is an era of or element of validity. So it is the fourth step and the most important out of all. Why? Because it involves asking the questions to ourselves that whether the results that we are getting it is confirming the theory, or any other explanation can be provided to this result. So this is basically a hypothesis testing that can be done, which is basically a researcher which remarks regarding the true value of the parameter, because we want to check whether the true value of the parameter, that is from the population, is correctly specified by the sample, and thereby population and the sample parameters are hand in hand or each other. That is, the sample statistic should be a true reflection of the population parameter. And that is how the proofreading can be done in the methodology of econometrics. So, regarding the econometrics methodology, we go by the three fundamentals. The three fundamentals are given by, firstly, the quality of the parameter findings depends on the current working condition of the economic model. What do we mean by the statement? First of all, what do we mean by the parameter? Parameter is the characteristic of the population which is estimated based on the sample. So whether the economic model is currently working, economic model means any relationship between dependent and independent, and whether that is in the working condition or not, which means whether that is taking care of all the statistics or the vital issues in it. That is how we talk about quality findings. Secondly, if we are going to assess any kind of independent variables affecting the dependent variable, for example, we want to find out what are the factors responsible for erosion of profitability of the banks, or what are the factors determining the non-performing asset of the banking sector, then all the explanatory variables that we select should be taken from the relevance point of view. So whether any one of the variable we can exclude, and we can make the variable to be less robust. So if we take out any variable, whether the estimate becomes unreliable or whether the estimate becomes inaccurate, that needs to be evaluated. And thirdly, the very important is the parameter estimates, which has to be validated with the statistical data, because this statistical data is the fundamental formulation of the parameter estimate. So three important steps come in. Firstly, about the findings of the parameter. Secondly, about the explanatory variable that comes in. And finally, how the parameter estimates are based on the data that is taken care of. So based on this, we can formulate a mathematical methodology of econometrics. First, it is the theory suggestion. Second, how a statistical model is to be specified. Third, how the variables need to be estimated. And fourthly, we have to look into the validity of the model or the proofreading, which takes place a very important role. Here we refer to the functions of econometrics. There are three functions which can be stated as follows. The first function is to test out the economic theory or the hypothesis. That means economic theory is deep-rooted in the economic fundamentals and hypothesis is to be framed. The second function of econometrics is to provide the numerical estimates, because whenever the economic theory is to be tested, it should go through an empirical specification where there should be an interrelationship between the dependent and independent variable inclusive of an error term. So based on that, the variables are taken care of and the numerical estimates are being done. And this is very much important in the decision making. Thirdly, when we refer to any kind of econometric modeling, we refer to how economics can take care of the appropriate function and we can take care of the proper tools that are done in econometrics. So based on that, we can have a series of applications of econometrics in the real life. The first application takes care of impact of immigration on the native workers, because this is related to a study which can be done at the micro level by collecting the responses, or it can also be done at the macro level by collecting the migration data. So when we refer to immigration, it means in a particular country the supply of workers increases. So standard economic theory predicts that equilibrium wage will decrease for all workers. So whenever there is any immigration, then definitely the equilibrium wage will fall, and that is what will be predicted by the theory. But since immigration also has a positive demand effects, econometric estimates are to determine the net effect of immigration in the labor market. So net means taking care of the positive and the negative effects. So whenever we take care of immigration, then we can set up an econometric model and we can highlight on what are the factors which are leading to the immigration, and we can carry out its impact on the wage level, whether the wage level is on the rise or the wage level is on the fall. So if the wage level is on the fall, then definitely we can take care of the econometrician model and we can give a proper logic, or it can also have a positive effect. So in most of the cases, the net effect is being done by taking care of the positive effect, or we can also show some mixed findings. The second example which says that identifying the factors that affects the firm's entry and exit in a market. This is absolutely a study on microeconomics based on the behavior of the market, or it can also come under the study on industrial organization regarding what are the factors responsible for entry and exit. So the microeconomic field of industrial organization says that many issues of interest are concerned with the firm concentration and the market power. So for example, many factors like existing profit levels, fixed cost, government regulation, all of them influence the market power. So whenever we are talking about any market structure, then definitely it is also defined by number of producers. It also is defined by the number of consumer demand and existing level of organizational setup. So based on this, we can run a regression model and we can find out what are the significant variables that are coming up in the study and which can influence the entry and the exit pattern. The next important study can be what can be the determining factors of minimum wage laws on employment levels. So whenever we are working on the minimum wage laws, it means that there we are referring to a price floor, because minimum wage will create a surplus of the labor. So whenever the wage is being set so that it is the subsistence wage, then definitely the surplus labor will rise, and this is where the minimum wage will depend on. So a labor economist will try to give an econometric technique to take out the fundamentals on it. The next point that is very important to study a relationship between management techniques and workers' productivity. Because this study also can be done in an econometric framework. Because when we talk about the management study or any kind of management techniques, it is the use of high performance work practices such as workers' autonomy or flexible work schedules or other policies which will become popular among the managers. So at that point of time, this will also contribute to the productivity benefits. So econometric models can explain how these productivity benefits will explain the working management and how we can take care of this econometric modeling in a better manner. So that is what the mathematical techniques comes up. Further, when we proceed to take more examples, we can even take down a study from the finance. For example, a study on moral hazard or a study on adverse selection in the field of insurance theory, like measuring the association between insurance coverage and individual health outcomes. Which means whenever I am increasing the affordability of the medical insurance, it also will take care of the health outcomes because this will reduce the overall medical expenditure. So whenever the medical expenditure will come down, then the medical coverage will come up and the health outcomes can be done. So this study can be done at individual data. This study can be done based on the gender. This study also can be done on the region specific, like rural versus urban. Next, we have the forecasting macroeconomic indicators. So when we refer to the macroeconomics, we refer some expected effects of monetary and fiscal policy. So what type of monetary policy, what type of fiscal policy, all these are affecting the performance of the economy and thereby the socio-economic indicators can be taken care of. So that is how the macroeconomic indicators play an important role in the entire study of econometrics. Further, as we proceed, on the revenue side of any study, where we say that for a marketing campaign, what can be the strategies to raise the revenue? This also can be an innovative study based on a perceptual basis. Like we have seen that in the field of econometrics and management, the concept of marketing has become entirely dependent on forecasting or on empirical methods. So thereby there can be a study on the sales and efforts. There can be a study on the revenue generation, like what type of advertising, how this type of questions can be taken up. So all these can influence the marketing platform. Further, the study can be on impact of tax credit on R&D expenditure, research and development expenditure. So when we refer to research and development expenditure, it refers to the product innovation or the quality improvement or the tax credits. All these are inherent in this setup. So as a matter of fact, distributional effects can be done, or in the pharmaceutical industry, any kind of R&D comes in, how it affects the packaging, how it affects the strategic performance, all these are referred to these kind of research-based studies. So we can see some of the environmental studies in this regard where applications of econometrics can be done. For example, the trade policies on pollution levels. Like we have the most important thing of the Ignatz environmental Kuznets-curve hypothesis, where we go by the pollution heaven hypothesis. So this can be done across the country. This can be done on the basis of pollution permit or any kind of environmental condition. Further, the study on the dividend announcements can also be taken up because it's a study on the stock market, or we can study the price and the investment behavior in this regard. So any kind of news, how it can be treated in econometrics, any kind of shock, whether it's a positive or a negative impact. So farm profits, farm earnings can be taken care of in this regard. So based on this, we can address a question that highlight any 6 important applications of econometrics. The first application can be firms' entry-exit behavior. It can be relationship between the management techniques and the worker productivity. It can be any kind of relationship between insurance coverage and the health outcomes, or dividend announcements, or based on the R&D expenditure or on the pollution levels. So for all these matters, we can explain how this econometric modeling can be done. So now we refer finally to the examples of using econometrics. So example can be given in this regard by any study between income expenditure, production supply cost, labor capital, productivity, where we can say a simple equation where we see that education is influencing wage, inclusion of an error term. And it is taken in the log terms, so ln wage equals to beta 0, which is the intercept term, beta 1 years of education, that is the slope coefficient, and the error term. And that is how an empirical specification can be done. There can be more such examples like investment of the stock in a company, and in order to do the stock, what are the perceptional studies can be done, what can be the attitudinal study, what are the risk-taking issues can be done. All of them can take up from a financial analyst view and we can go for it. Similarly, we can use this econometrics in the terms of gross income method, expenditure analysis in case of the expenditure done. So in all these cases, econometrics has a very important role. And finally, we come to the question of different economic concepts that econometricians take care of, like income expenditure concept, production supply cost concept, labor capital, and also in case of the salary and productivity. So in conclusion, we can say that econometrics can be of two types, theoretical and empirical, and also we can see applied. Econometrics, which is theoretical, is based on the classical concepts. Econometrics, which is applied, is based on the empirical data which validates the theory. Moreover, econometrics can have a definite methodology to work on, which is leading with the formulation till the inference. It has a wide applications over economics, finance, business, marketing, and many other fields. And also in econometrics is based on a specification whereby we can work on. And the functions are very important in the regard of formulation, estimation, validation, and finally the policy framing that can be done. So that is why econometrics takes up a bigger shape in terms of a separate discipline and in terms of a research tool inculcating the insights of statistics, economics, and mathematics taken together. Thank you.